Hey, it is Saturday afternoon. It's NFL Week 7, and we're here talking our DFS top core plays for this Sunday's main slate. We might be dealing with a limited slate this weekend with a number of teams on buys, but there are a million different ways you can go in DFS. So I'm here simplifying it for you, giving you those guys you should be focusing your lineups on. So if you're looking for Week 7 DFS top core plays, keep watching and try to keep up. Hey, welcome back to No Huddle Fantasy Sports. First and foremost, I want to thank you guys for clicking on this video, finding this channel, but more importantly, joining me each and every week as we put out these DFS-centric style videos where we focus on only the top core plays each and every week on DraftKings and on FanDuel. Of course, if you are new here or simply haven't done so already, please hit that subscribe button below. It goes a long way in helping this channel continue to grow. It shows me that people are genuinely interested in following these videos, so obviously makes it a lot more enjoyable for me. And with that, I do want to also announce that we are quickly approaching 100 subscribers here on YouTube, which is absolutely amazing, awesome on my end. I realize it's not a huge number, but for me to have 100 people are willing to listen to my videos each week is absolutely awesome. And as we approach that number, the plan is once we break 100 subscribers, I will do some sort of giveaway. I know that's pretty common here on YouTube, so I do want to do something specific to this channel, fantasy football focused. I'm thinking something more along the lines of utilizing FanDuel or DraftKings. Stay tuned for that. Hopefully next week we do break that number of 100. But just continue to hit that subscribe button below. Continue to follow these videos and stay tuned for that giveaway. And also just really quickly, I'm going to link it above in this video, and I will also put it in the description. If you haven't done so already, please check out my video that came out a couple of days ago. It's not just DFS specific, but it is matchup specific. So I'm talking defense versus position. Been putting these videos out for a while. They do get actually the majority of my views on this channel. But with that video, I've also now included spreadsheets for quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end. I've received a lot of great comments to kind of do beyond that video, put out actually all rankings. So I went ahead and did that. I've created individual spreadsheets. Like I mentioned, click the link above in this video or find it in the description. It'll take you to the matchup weekly video. In that description of that video, you will find another link that will take you where you can download those spreadsheets, basically which teams are giving up the most amount of points per position. All right, so we have wasted enough time with all that talk. Let's just jump right into this week's DFS video. Something new each week. I am kind of just going to quickly recap how we did in week 6. I want to be transparent here. You can always go back to the old video, but just to quickly look at our core plays last week, we did really, really well. I know personally I did profit last week. I hope you guys did the same following along this video. A lot of our plays hit. Those that really didn't were just basically injury related. You can see Matt Ryan, Deshaun Watson, both those guys went off. A lot of our running backs went off. The only ones that kind of struggled, Le'Veon Bell didn't have the greatest game. Malcolm Brown was kind of a bust, but he was cheap, so it didn't hurt us. Personally, though, like I said, I did profit last week. It was the first time I actually entered 150 lineups. I maxed out a contest. The ones that kind of prevented me from just going, off the charts. I did have a lot of Cooper. I had a lot of Disley, so that hurt me. But overall, if you kind of mixed up the lineups here and you used the core plays and the other plays, you should have had a great week 6. And the goal here, obviously, is to just continue that into week 7. So starting off every week with quarterbacks here. Full disclosure, I do play 4 quarterbacks each week, but my 2 core plays this week are Matt Ryan for Atlanta, Daniel Jones for the Giants. Matt Ryan is just, I think he's underpriced compared to the rest of the field here. He's 6,300 on DraftKings, 79 on FanDuel. Home underdog, love that for a quarterback. Versus the Rams, huge over-under, 54.5 in the Dome, +3 spread here. So it's a close game. It should be high scoring. All good things for our quarterback here. The big thing here, and what I already mentioned, is he's just underpriced compared to the field. He's averaging over 27 points, which is good for quarterback 2 on DraftKings, over 24 points on FanDuel, which is good for quarterback 4, yet he's priced below most guys, most of those top-end guys. It just doesn't make sense. In fact, I think his prices on both sites dropped into week 7. I don't understand why. He offers an amazing solid floor with those numbers. He posted 33-plus points week 6 and 35 plus points in week 5, just continues to dominate 30 plus performances, and he's thrown over 300 yards every single week this season, mainly because their defense sucks and they have to continue to trail, continue to pass the ball. They don't have much of a run game, which just really leads to more Matt Ryan, more volume, more opportunity, and it's really paying out so far this year in terms of fantasy. It isn't a top-tier elite matchup this week, which doesn't scare me. Like I mentioned, he offers a solid floor. He continues to get it done and has the weapons. But the one thing I want to mention here is the Rams lost Peters but added Ramsey. So we don't obviously know the net effect on their defense right now. All things right now do point to Ramsey playing this week for the Rams, but I don't think that's going to really matter for Matt Ryan. He has all the weapons he needs, and he should continue to get it done. You're looking at huge upside, solid floor, everything you want out of a quarterback. Second guy on my list here, I struggle between a couple of guys, but the one I'm going to list here is Daniel Jones for his price for the Giants. Pretty low price, $6,100 on DraftKings, $72 on FanDuel. He is a home favorite versus Arizona, 50.5 over-under, -4 spread. In terms of Arizona's defense and how they have been defending the pass, defending quarterbacks this year, they call them Arizona for a reason. Terrible joke on my part, but it is slightly true. Arizona's defense has been getting beat through the air this year, giving up a lot of points, a lot of yards. So it is a great matchup, elite top 3 matchup versus the Arizona defense for Jones. More specifically, you're looking at 281 passing yards a game given up by Arizona and 25 plus DraftKings points, 23 plus FanDuel points per game to the quarterback position. The one thing to note here is they might be getting back Patrick Peterson this week, which should obviously add a huge boost to their pretty awful secondary. But nonetheless, I still like Daniel Jones for the Giants. Moving on to the running back position, this is the position I'm willing to spend on this week. I think there's a lot of value to be had elsewhere. A main reason I included Daniel Jones and Matt Ryan as my quarterbacks. I think you can spend down a little bit of quarterback, spend down at wide receiver and other positions, and just kind of smack in these high-end, high-priced running backs. I do love Dalvin Cook for Minnesota this week. He's super expensive. $8,000 on DraftKings, $8,300 on FanDuel, but he is in a great spot. A lot of running backs this week kind of go against my typical strategy, which is a home favorite running back. These guys are road favorites. So Dalvin Cook fits that example. Slight road favorite at Detroit at -2.5. Detroit is a top 3 matchup for the running back position in terms of fantasy points per game. They're giving up over 105 rushing yards per game to running backs. And as a unit, that's led to Detroit giving up over 31 points per game on DraftKings, 26 points per game on FanDuel to running backs. But more importantly, Dalvin Cook is just a monster. He's having an incredible year for an offense that's committed to him and committed to running the ball. Over 5.4 rushing yards per carry this year. He gets the volume. He's averaging 22 touches a game, which is great. He's involved in the passing game, even if they do go down, 4+ targets a game. And he's had a number of big games on the road, so I'm not necessarily worried about them playing away. Leonard Fournette for Jacksonville was the next running back I list here. Keep in mind, he's getting talked about a lot this week, so he's going to garnish some high ownership. He is a road favorite at Cincinnati at -4, another road running back, but a big favorite. But there are a couple key items here to focus in on. Number one, it's the matchup. Cincinnati is just getting murdered on the ground each and every week, giving up over 36 points on DraftKings, 32 plus on FanDuel to the running back position. Each week, they're averaging over 126 rushing yards a game against them, and that's really led to a rushing yard per carry of over 5 yards, which is absolutely insane. And then number two, for Leonard Fournette, he's getting the volume. He's getting massive volume. I think overall, if you count touches, he's averaging over 23 touches a game, leads the NFL in that category. And he has 36 targets in the passing game through 6 games. So if you're worried about him playing on the road in Cincinnati, which I'm absolutely not, he stays on the field. He is involved in the passing game. You got to love that. And really, if you look back for a solid floor, he hasn't had under 20 carries since week 3. And no less than 17 overall touches all year. So you're talking about a guy that gets volume in an elite matchup. I love Fournette this weekend. Tevin Coleman is also one of my favorite backs going into this weekend for San Francisco. He's not quite as expensive as these other guys, which is great. He's now had a couple games under his belt since he's been injured, but more importantly, he's playing off of Washington this week. They're on the road, again, another road favorite running back, but they're huge favorites at -9.5. We know a couple of things about San Francisco, one of which is that they want to run the ball a lot, and they've done that so far this year. I think a lot of people, which is good for us, are scared off of Coleman because of that backfield and how they kind of split carries, but I think he is the lead back if you really look into it. He had 20 touches in week 6, but more importantly, he had all of the red zone rushing attempts, which was 8 last week. So he is the guy that they want in at the goal line. And he had 18 of 35 of the rushing attempts last week, over 50%. He was on the field for 55% of their snaps. All these numbers are increasing week over week. So I think this week he could even extend that a little bit more against a weak Washington team. Washington in particular is a top 5 matchup for running backs. They're giving up over 105 rushing yards a game. And in terms of points, you're looking at 29 plus, 25 plus on both sites to the running back position each and every week. And finally here, I'm not absolutely in love with this, but if you're talking about a core play, a guy that's pretty cheap, I'm not going much cheaper than this. I like Joe Mixon for Cincinnati. I know I just talked about Leonard Fournette playing against them, but the spread is -4. It's not quite as high as I thought it would be. Cincinnati might just be able to stay in this game for the entire game. At least that's what I'm hoping, and that's what I'm basing this pick for Joe Mixon off of. He's a home underdog versus Jacksonville. Jacksonville isn't great against the run. They're giving up over 114 rushing yards a game, 5.2 per carry, which is obviously not great. And I think if Cincinnati is ever going to win a game, they need to establish the run. Joe Mixon is that guy. He can be a 3-down back. He obviously is effective at running the ball, but he can catch the ball out of the backfield just as well as anybody else. He was regarded as an elite back in the past. I just don't think they've gone to him enough. And if there's ever an opportunity to do so, it's this week at home versus a weak run Jacksonville defense. And finally, my point to drive home with him, so far this year, he hasn't been that effective. I mentioned that already. Everything's down. All of his numbers are down, but he has played some really tough defenses. If you look back, he's played Pittsburgh, Baltimore, Buffalo, and San Francisco. All those teams are pretty elite in terms of defending the running game. And the one matchup he had that was pretty excellent was against Arizona, in which case he had 19 carries for 93 yards. That's a pretty good game. If he scores a touchdown or breaks 100 yards on DraftKings, you're talking about a lot of points there. And he's only $5,000 on DraftKings, $6,100 on FanDuel, so a little bit more expensive. I like Joe Mixon this week. I'm going to take a gamble on him in a lot of lineups. Moving on to the wide receiver position, this is where I think you can save money to kind of fit in those more expensive backs. But the first guy I'm going to list here is expensive. It's Cooper Kupp for the Rams. The big thing here is just volume. He leads the NFL in targets. He has 69 so far this year, averaging 11.5 a game. It's an elite matchup against an Atlanta team that can't stop anyone through the air. A top 3 defensive matchup. He's a favorite target of Jared Goff. If you remove the abysmal last week performance by the Rams, that actual targets per game goes up to like 12.5. So you got to like Cooper Kupp week in and week out. But this week, in an elite matchup, the Rams running backs are banged up. They're going to throw the ball. It's high scoring. I love Cooper Kupp this week. Next up is T.Y. Hilton for Indianapolis. You can save some money here. He's underpriced in my opinion. $5,900 on DraftKings, $7,600 on FanDuel. It's a great matchup, and he has a really solid history against Houston. If you just look back to last year, in 2 games against them, he had 22 targets, turned that into 14 receptions for 284 yards, including a 199-yard game. Beyond that, Houston has been pretty effective against the run, but not so effective against the pass, so they can be exploited there. And T.Y. Hilton is getting good red zone usage this year. It's resulted in 8 total touchdowns. I like T.Y. Hilton, especially on DraftKings this week. Moving on to Calvin Ridley here for Atlanta. I told you how much I like Matt Ryan, and the easy way to go with him is Julio Jones, but I'm probably not doing that this week. I think Jalen Ramsey, as I mentioned, plays and shadows Julio Jones. That should, in theory, leave a ton of opportunity for other receivers like Ridley. If, in fact, Ramsey does shadow and guard Julio, that leaves basically an elite matchup for Ridley against some just garbage backup cornerbacks for the Rams. They lost Talib to injured reserve. They traded Peters. There's really no one left. And a random note I wrote down here is if you look back to last year, Calvin Ridley's big game came in a similar situation. They played New Orleans, and you had Lattimore shadowing and guarding Julio, and Calvin Ridley absolutely went off. I think we have another week of that. He's a decent price, allows us to pay down a little bit at receiver. I like Calvin Ridley. For value this week, I'm looking at Cole Beasley for Buffalo. A lot of people are going to be focusing on John Brown with Josh Allen. A lot of people like that combo this week. I like Cole Beasley. He's been injured. He's coming off injury. But if you look at weeks 3 and 4, he was a huge favorite target in PPR, especially for Josh Allen. He had 23 targets between those 2 weeks. I like Cole Beasley as a value, especially on DraftKings where he's only $4,700. And finally, moving on to the tight end position here. I usually hate the tight end position each week, but this week in particular, I really do like it. There's a number of guys I'm looking at, but in particular, I like Mark Andrews and Hunter Henry. Mark Andrews, he's a decent price on both sites, but really it's the matchup here. Seattle actually kind of under the radar, is a top 5 matchup for tight ends, giving up over 16 points on DraftKings, over 12 on FanDuel. He has become easily Lamar Jackson's favorite target. It seems like Lamar Jackson does two things when he drops back. He looks to run and he looks to throw to Mark Andrews. And that's evident by he's averaging 7.8 targets a game, which is 4th in the NFL for tight ends this year. And there's been a number of injuries to Baltimore receivers. I don't know if Brown will be playing, so that might funnel more targets towards Andrews' way. They're playing on the road in Seattle. They're probably going to have to throw the ball a lot. I love Mark Andrews this week for Baltimore. Next up, my second favorite guy this week is Hunter Henry for the Chargers. He exploded last week for the Chargers on a primetime game. He still hasn't been adjusted because of that on DraftKings at $4,000. Huge value, $5,700, still pretty good on FanDuel. But that is an elite value for a guy that has a lot of upside at the tight end position. We were worried last week because he was coming off injury, how much he would play. He played 66% of the offensive snaps, 41 of them in total in week 6. He had 9 targets. He turned it into 8 catches for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. He had 3 red zone targets, which you gotta love for the tight end position. You need those guys to score. And this matchup this week against Tennessee, they are a strong defense, but they're susceptible to the tight end. So I do like Hunter Henry as a value, especially on DraftKings this week. There are a number of other guys I want to just quickly discuss and show you, but these are the other considerations. Kyler Murray for Arizona, I highlighted him in gold. He's really expensive this week on sites, but he's still worth it. Probably the last matchup I'm interested in for him against the Giants. After that, it gets a little bit tougher. I got Chris Carson this week. Probably will see some low ownership, which is great. He's heavily involved. Baltimore got destroyed by good running backs like Nick Chubb, so Chris Carson in a great spot. Aaron Jones for Green Bay. I think you're going to see a lot of ownership drop on him this week, even though it's a good matchup, mainly because of what Williams did last week, but I still like Aaron Jones. Michael Thomas, we already got news that Alvin Kamara is out, so a lot of people will probably just instantly go to Murray, but they're playing a pretty stout, pretty strong run defense. I think that's going to just equal more opportunity, more volume towards Michael Thomas in the passing game. I like him as an elite receiver that should see more volume. Super value here. Basically on both sites, I think. Allen Lazard for Green Bay. We saw him kind of emerge as a number 1 or number 2 receiver last week for Green Bay with Devontae Adams out and a number of the other guys getting banged up. He will be owned, but Allen Lazard this week for Green Bay. And finally, Evan Ingram is in an incredible spot. I didn't list him as my tight end core plays simply because he's super expensive, but I will be trying to pair him as much as possible with Jones this week. Evan Ingram, great spot this week, but just expensive. Wow, we covered a lot there. A little bit longer than I expected, but we're coming off a great week 6. I plan to make this a really good week 7. These are the core plays. These are my other considerations. I hope you guys enjoy this video. I hope you're benefiting from it. As I mentioned, if you go back to my earlier in the week video, you can pull up the spreadsheets. You can click that link. You can get all the defense versus position data you need for the week. And as always, thank you again for tuning in, clicking this video, sticking with me to the end of this video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. As I mentioned, there will be some giveaways coming up as soon as I break 100 subscribers. I've really enjoyed this. I hope you guys are too and you're benefiting from it. And I will catch you in the next video and see you at the top of this week's leaderboards.